agree with the use of marijuana.
No. It places it there.
This is KTN News.
All right, welcome back to Morning Express. It's now just gone to 24 minutes to 7, and it's time for the Dawn Debate. And, well, I'll go straight to introducing the panel that we have this morning to have this debate. And I'll start with Sandra Ochola, who is a lawyer. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. We have George Ndonji, who's a political strategist. Good morning.
Good morning.
Last but not least, we have Mark Odinga, who is a political analyst. Thank you for joining us, lady and gentlemen, to the Dawn Debate. A reminder that you're welcome to participate in this debate as well, and you can do that via Twitter, or you can also call once we have the lines open. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem not to be getting rid of the name IEBC, and it looks like it's going to continue for a while. And I'd just like to maybe start off by hearing what you have to say with the current situation. We have now the opposition leader saying that even the ballot papers that may be almost, well, being printed, there seems to have been a meeting between top Jubilee officials and the printers, which of course would cast doubt in how credible IEBC is. I'll start with you, George.
Well, you know, IEBC is supposed to be like Caesar's wife. Without any shadow of doubt, they are supposed to be clean. There is not supposed to be anything that would give an impression that there is any influence at all in them, so that they're able to conduct a free and fair election. So the level of confidence is important. Although the current IEBC is better than the one that we had in the previous elections.
Okay, and do you think with all the jabs that they have received so far, we are likely to have, even if we had a credible election, does it look like the water is already muddied?
Not really. That's why I said I think they're better than the team that we had previously. The level of confidence may not be all that high, but at least I think they're able to hold a credible election.
Okay, Mark, your thoughts?
I think the opposition has been on a progressive path to destabilize IEBC, to demonize IEBC, and to make it look like whatever happens, it's not possible to have a credible election process. Because you can't as a leader, as a major presidential candidate, you can't walk around saying IEBC met government officials before the tender was given, IEBC government officials met the printer before the tender was awarded, without producing any evidence at all. I mean, there won't be a difference between them and their social media propagandists. At this time, late in the day, 54 days to the next election, I think it is the responsibility of everyone on both sides of the political divide to give IEBC the benefit of the doubt and to support them as much as possible. Because even within the law, there is a framework for a consultative process amongst the stakeholders, and IEBC has been making quite a bit of effort in terms of bringing the parties together, informing them about what is happening, involving them as much as possible. But it seems like the opposition is almost already prepared for contesting the results of this election, no matter what happens, however credible it is. Because, I mean, I'm thinking about it. Let's suppose, for example, that government officials met the printer before the tender was awarded. So what? The ballots...
Obviously, the so what question would be a major question, because then the questions, of course, would be, first of all, what was the content of their meeting? Why were they meeting? Then how credible is that firm in regards to delivering ballot papers?
The firm is not... The firm's participation in the electoral process is limited to printing ballot papers. Those ballot papers will be delivered here. They'll be taken to polling stations where every political party will have an agent. Those ballot papers will be issued to persons that have already been identified, that are identified using biometrics. Yeah, and I remember watching the IEBC CEO yesterday saying that the biometrics will be the primary mode of identification of voters. And in an instance where that is not possible, then everybody in the polling station will be informed and all agents will agree and a record will be kept. Yeah? So it doesn't matter, even if they printed 500 million ballot papers, for example, ultimately, the control on how many people vote, yeah, is a responsibility both of IEBC, but also of the party agent that will be present at every polling station that IEBC is conducting these elections. Yeah, so I think we are splitting hairs in terms of the preparations for the elections. We really need to get behind IEBC if we want this process to
all right, Sandra, your thoughts as a lawyer. Claims like those with no supporting evidence, first of all, would that be something that even the country should be considering at this time?
Well, I'll begin by saying, if you asked me the same question last week, I would have said that IEBC is not prepared completely, and it's doing a terrible job at preparing for the elections. But then what we saw in the past 2 days, it coming up with a national conference, inviting stakeholders, communicating with everyone else, I think that was a good move in terms of instilling public confidence in the election process. And even before this, it's important to give credit where credit is due. You have instances where you look back at the voter registration process, which, in my opinion, went on with very few glitches. And then it's also in the process of procurement and doing its tenders. It's also in the process of recruiting its election officials. And from what we have seen in the past 2 days, it's doing what it can to ensure that it's able to provide Kenyans with a free and fair election. And of course, we cannot have a perfect process. And I think that is what many Kenyans want. Many Kenyans desire. We desire something perfect, but that is almost impossible under these circumstances. I'm yet to hear of an election process or an IEBC that does its work in a very in a perfect manner. And so perhaps I think what we need to agree on are the minimums that we need to meet, the minimums that IEBC is supposed to deliver to the country for us to say that by August 8th, we are going to have a free and fair election. And it will also be important for us to address some of the issues that have come up, because elections is a whole process. The election is about perception. And now going back to your question, from a legal perspective, you wouldn't say, just like he said, that those could be termed as wild allegations. That were made in public.
Unless
and of course,
they're supported with evidence.
Unless they're supported with evidence. And of course, the opposition has been very overt in terms of its legal procedures. It goes to court whenever it feels that there are issues that it needs to address from a legal perspective. And so in this instance, if indeed there are allegations that something wrong has happened, that the IEBC did not follow the law, then the court is open.
It's open.
Yeah.
All right, George.
Can I react to something that my colleagues are saying here, which I think is not right at all?
Okay.
That Raila Odinga, whom they are quoting as having made wild allegation, has told Kenyans things before, which some doubting Thomas has cast on their doubts, but eventually they turn out to be true. So when you hear Raila speaking and a presidential candidate of that stature, you cannot, for certain, say that that is a wild allegation.
It is true.
And you should not even come to us for evidence. Where did you want Raila to give you the evidence from? When he tells you that, you wait and see what happens, because unless he was there, he was supposed to give you a picture or something of that sort to show you that there was a meeting. I mean, there is no question of evidence.
Now, the question that one may also raise as you say that, two things. One, the fact that he has said things and they have been true previously does not necessarily make this particular incident true. That's one. Number two, one would question the timing. If they met in February, why is it coming up now?
He is throwing some caution by saying, we know you met. And even players who are in a field, if the field is leveled, you're not supposed to meet a referee before the game. Yeah, it would certainly not be fair.
Michael, this same question was asked to the IEBC CEO yesterday, and he stated categorically that at no time have, to the best of his knowledge, as the printer and any government official met, have IEBC and any government official met insofar as the printing of ballot papers is concerned.
So you make a choice to trust that?
It is 53 days and slightly over 23 hours to the next election. Ballot papers are slated to be printed from IEBC's timeline from 26th of June. You do not go to court, or you do not go to the court of public opinion today and make allegations without proof That is such a serious allegation that if it were to have taken place, the moment you address a press conference to say it is the moment you table that proof. This notion of, oh, it was right on Eurobond, oh, it was right on NYS. These are the elections. People have died in this country because of contested elections. You do not go to a stage, call a press conference, make allegations like that without proof. So when is he going to table this proof? On 10th of August, after election results have been declared.
The interesting thing is that I think people make capital out of criticizing what Raila says, and you think you gain a higher platform, which is not necessarily the right thing to do or the truth. Because if he makes an allegation, he's making the allegations as one of the contestants, a main contestant in this election.
And the issue, George, is not the fact, it's not what he has said. The issue is, first of all, the timing, and secondly, the fact that there is no supporting evidence as we speak. Maybe there is evidence that he's aware about.
I would want to ask what evidence you'd have wanted him to give.
Looking at the time we have between now and the election, wouldn't you term that as a careless statement?
You cannot say that it is a careless statement. Anything that is put in place to throw caution is correct, because elections are very emotive issues. Yes, that require that everybody has confidence in the body that is actually conducting these elections.
Okay, Sandra?
I agree with this statement that elections are a very emotive exercise, especially for Kenyans. And it is for that particular reason that we must, as a community, as leaders, we must exercise responsibility, and particularly at a time when emotions are heightened, at a time when everything is sensitive. And so I must say that from a personal perspective, I have a lot of respect for Raila. One, as an individual who's ensured that as a country, it's put the government on its toes. We have made milestones as far as human rights and civic freedoms are concerned. But then it gets to a point where it's important for us to look through our decisions, look through our statements, and I repeat, this is not the time for us to make wild allegations. I'll say that again. And indeed, just like you're saying, this will have been the perfect time for him to say, there's something wrong, I'm throwing caution. Indeed, this is what is supposed to happen, but it's not happening. And this is what I'd like to see happening. Because at this point in time, the IEBC and the community, we need solutions, as opposed to issues that come up and where we are saying, oh, this is not working out and we need this and that. And so I'll repeat again, it's time for us to exercise personal and collective responsibility as far as getting a free and fair election.
Although you'll agree that if indeed there are concerns from the opposition leader, then they need to be addressed. I mean, it's never too late to make that announcement, especially if he has evidence.
Exactly. And I watched the news yesterday, and one of the commissioners stated this: if indeed there's an issue with the tender process or the ballot papers, they will be going to Dubai, and they're inviting stakeholders, even from the opposition and other independent individuals, to go with them to Dubai. Individuals who are going to look at this process right from the start to the point, to the packaging, to the printing of the ballot papers, to the time they arrive back in the country, so that no one will be raising questions later and saying, I was not involved in this process, I was not consulted, and there were issues. So that through that whole process, they've consulted, they've ensured that all the stakeholders are represented. And so I thought that is something really good in terms of addressing all these issues. But
I would want to say something here, that when you caution, it is not a wild statement. Because Raila himself, when he said that, he did not say he does not have confidence in IEBC. You know, it's like we are saying that when you're going for the elections, anything that is noticed should not be spoken about. And that is not right, because like Sandra said, we are not perfect. IEBC is not perfect. But we want them to move as close as possible to perfection. Yes, and that's a simple thing, that whenever there's an issue, it's got to be raised.
Okay, but the thing is, if we all appreciate Raila's position in this country as a leader who has a following, and a big following for that matter, and when he makes a statement like that, is it likely to create an environment where there is more doubt cast without necessarily solving it? Because the question is, what is the solution? Okay, now that they sat with Jubilee leaders, if at all it is true, where does that leave us? What's the solution after you've made a statement like that?
Probably
what's IEBC to do?
Yeah, probably what I would have said is not a question of what IEBC is supposed to do. It's a question of caution that we are aware you have done this and that, but it should not be used to determine what is coming ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Mark Odinga?
Michael, Raila didn't issue a caution. He made an allegation. In fact, he almost stated, that he knows Jubilee leaders met the printers, and it was in context. It was designed because you remember NASA is going to court to contest the award of the ballot paper printing tender to Al Ghurair. Yeah, it was within that context that NASA is convinced, with no evidence at all, that the printing process of those ballot papers is flawed. And he has made these allegations before, even way back in 2013, that some 5 million ballot papers were transported to the country, given to NIS, to Primark, to go and stuff, and that is how Uhuru won by, nearly 2 million votes, that they stuffed ballot papers for dead voters, allegations that are unsubstantiated and can actually not be substantiated. I think, and I'll say this again, the opposition has deliberately issued statements and taken action that are designed to cripple IEBC, and if not, to delegitimize the process they're involved in, so that come August 8th or 9th or 10th, when the election results come out, they have a reason to say, we told you so. We told you these people were doing monkey business, which is a phrase he likes using quite a bit. These people were doing monkey business. Now you see they have rigged this election. This is designed to ensure that whatever comes out of that election that does not declare Raila the winner, it is contestable, and he has grounds, historical grounds, for having a dispute to that level. And then he will say, we can't even go to court because we took these things to court and they were dismissed. And you're doing this 53 days to elections, we need to be more responsible.
You know what I would want to say? Even if, Mark, you feel that you are actually on the side of the bread that is battered now, it does not mean that you propagate lies against others. The opposition is there to check on the government. And if the opposition was not there, you can't believe what Jubilee would have done with this country by now. They check on the government, they check on what the government is doing on behalf of the people. Please respect that. And then don't look at it like...
IEBC does not belong to government. IEBC is an independent institution. Yeah, in fact, an independent institution whose reconstitution was spearheaded by the opposition itself, and upon which quite a number of people even died. Yes. So you've led a process that has replaced the commissioners that you thought were biased. Yeah? Brought in people to office through a consultative process that you are intimately involved with. Then you spent the next 8 months discrediting the same institution that you spearheaded the reconstitution of. I mean, we have to, at some point, give independent institutions the freedom to actually do the job for which we appointed them to do.
But you know, your stomach should not rumble just because the government...
My stomach is not rumbling. I'm just saying, if you're going to make allegations like this, please table evidence. If you do not have, then, zip it.
Until the time the evidence is there. All right, and let's move on now as we get closer to the top of the hour. And there was a statement that the president made yesterday, and this was in regards to, the fact that should he lose, he will concede defeat. And of course, there were those who are asking whether Raila is going to make a similar statement. But let's listen to what, first of all, the opposition leader had to say.
He has remained silent in the middle of all this. That is worrying indeed. It is not a way to build faith that the elections will be free, fair, and credible.
We must not be chipping at its body with constant negative rhetoric that undermine its credibility in the court of public opinion.
Development is ill-advised and unfortunate. It casts a dark shadow which could have been avoided over the credibility of the August elections.
NASA claims some Jubilee officials may have had a hand in the...
He has remained silent in the middle of all this.
All right, so those are some of the statements that were made yesterday. Let me start with you, Sandra, on the question of IEBC basically taking its rightful position. Have they been authoritative enough to make sure that people have confidence in them and do what needs to be done when it needs to be done? For instance, when we have leaders who are flaunting election laws, they're silent.
Well, those are some of the shortcomings I was highlighting, because we have the code of conduct that most political parties and politicians are supposed to be adhering to. And we saw this even from the nomination period, where they were told that you're not supposed to be campaigning, but then now you saw lots of campaigns taking place at that time. And the explanation that the IEBC gave was that for them, they are publicizing. So creating that distinction between publicizing and campaigning became an issue. And you saw no politician was brought to book. And then now you have all these discussions about state officers and cabinet secretaries participating in political rallies and whatnot. And of course, people expect them to come out and say this is wrong, and you're supposed to be. This is not what you are breaking the law. This is not what you're supposed to do, and we expect you to take certain measures to either refrain from what you're doing and to address the issues that are coming up. But then one thing that we also need to be very careful about is to place all responsibility on one institution. Managing an electoral process is not the responsibility of only one institution. We have the institution of the police, we have all the ombudsman for that matter, we have all these other institutions that are meant to ensure that we have a free and fair election. And so what the IEBC must do is to show citizens that indeed it's doing its part, and it has created linkages through which it's working with the other institutions to ensure that we are meeting standards, those basic standards that we need to have.
Makodigo, do you think they've done a good job in at least creating a perception? Because they say perception is reality, a perception that they are in charge.
Unfortunately, I think in this country, we believe politicians more than we believe institutions and their heads. So that whatever good work an institution like IEBC will do can be undone in one single political statement. Given the time that they have had, I mean, these commissioners have hardly been in office for half a year. Yeah.
But the secretariat has been working, so...
The secretariat has been working, but the political heads, so to speak, of IEBC is the commissioners. I have watched quite a couple of them articulate IEBC and their issues and the progress they're making and the consultations they're making quite publicly. But unfortunately, what grabs news, if Wafula Chebukati says today, we are ready, we are prepared for August 8th, it won't be headline. If in the same day, a political leader comes up and says, election will be rigged, that will be headlines, screaming headlines on all major news media. So I think even as IEBC makes effort to win the public over, to prepare for a credible election, we also need to hold our media and politicians responsible so that the media also begins to highlight the achievements of the electoral body, the achievements of the commission, the efforts that are being made, because I know there is quite a bit in terms of multi-sectoral approach to the election. IEBC has held a conference like this before with the police, with the ODPP, with the NCIC, in terms of bringing together EACC and all these institutions, bring all these institutions together to prepare them for the election. Now, in terms of enforcement, even of the Code of Conduct and the Elections Act, IEBC is literally like EACC. Yeah, it can say all these things, but ultimately the responsibility for investigations lies on the police. The responsibility for prosecutions lies on ODPP, and all these other institutions need to do their jobs.
To work together.
Yeah, to work together to ensure that IEBC is capable of actually enforcing the law as it is.
Okay. George, your thoughts on the authority that IEBC has and whether they have stamped that authority for people to see that indeed they are in charge?
But I think by and large they have, in my opinion, done a good job. Being as it were that the commissioner just came into place the other day. They are trying their best, including holding of the conference that was there yesterday. And I think we need to give them some benefit of doubt in terms of the elections that are coming.
Okay, so do they need some breathing space?
I'm happy that Makodigo said that when it's politicians who are making statements, they become headline. But I also want him to appreciate that if IEBC makes a statement that the elections are going to be free and fair, they are simply doing their job. And politicians, of course, are given the upper hand because they are expected to be watchful. They are expected to be the people's watchmen. And that is why their concerns are raised higher.
Okay, do you think the politicians then have a role in creating trust within communities? Because one of the things that we may be suffering from may not even be the inability for IEBC to do their work, but the fact that there is mistrust.
Actually, that is a very good question, because that mistrust, again, is created by politicians for their own benefit. Politicians are supposed to make us become cohesive as a nation, as a people, yet they don't do that because most politicians are selfish. Even when one has performed, they would tell you that that person has not performed. You know, so I think our politicians play below the bar, and they should up their game.
Okay. Your thoughts on possibly the role that politicians would have in creating that trust? Because one of the biggest problems we have is just purely mistrust.
Yes, I do agree with you. And from my perspective, I am hoping that at some point we'll start working towards building institutions that can outlive us. Because we make laws with a here and now perspective. We make decisions with a here and now perspective. And most times those making the laws to satisfy the agenda at the moment will not be the same people affected by these laws 10 or 5 years down the line. And then you realize situations where you have young people, and especially those who are first-time voters, those who are just getting into leadership, now being affected by the decisions that we made 10 or so years ago. And so I think it's important for us to think through our actions again and think through the kind of statements we make in terms of creating trust within our institutions, building a cohesive environment, promoting national unity as the Constitution provides. When politicians indeed have a role in promoting that.
All right, Odinga, your closing comments and maybe thoughts on the way forward, especially regarding now, we only have 54 days to go before we get to the election, and definitely this is not a time to be raising political temperature, so to speak.
If there are legitimate issues, they should be raised. And a possible solution proposed, and people brought to the table to solve the issues that are there. If there are no if the issues are political, please keep them to rallies and keep them to attacking your opponents. I mean, you can say whatever you want about your opponents. You can insult them all you want. You can raise credibility issues about them. I mean, that is part of political campaigns. But please do not attack the institutions that are supposed to deliver us an election, because this election is happening. I think in the minds of some, it's almost like we're behaving like the election is not, could possibly be postponed, that you could raise sufficient issues that there's no election. This election is cast in stone. It is happening on 8th of August. The least we can do is to ensure that the processes run as smoothly as possible, that as much faith is on the institution of IEBC and the rest of the institutions that are involved in this process, that politicians are responsible and not reckless in their statements, so that then we give public confidence. I am sure if both sides of the political divide, and on both sides I am saying NASA and Jubilee, the rest really are, if both of them were to stand on a stage and say, this election, we believe in IEBC, we believe in the process that they're undertaking, we believe this election will be free and fair, that will be the end of it. We saw this in 2013 when the politicians from both sides said, if you have a dispute with the election, we'll go to Supreme Court. And that was it. The country was calm, we went through an election, we went through a court process, people might have disagreed with the result, but we accepted it because we already said,
this is the way we are going to handle it. George, your closing comments.
Yeah, I would agree a lot with what my colleagues have said, that politicians need to bridge the gap. ODM and NASA specifically need to come up and say, now we think despite all that is happening, these elections, we have confidence in IEBC, and we believe that the elections are going to be free and fair.
Free and fair. Closing comments, Sandra?
I think as a country we still have a long way to go as far as democracy is concerned. We have it in our laws, we talk about it on a day-to-day basis, but it's not something we live with the reality of it. And I think as a community, it's time for us to address the underlying issues that ensure that we lack trust in our institutions, that ensure that we are seeing elections as a do-or-die affair, and to ensure that as a community, we view each other. And I think you mentioned that that we saw that in the clip earlier when Jubilee and Uhuru in particular stated that if I lose these elections, so be it. We still have a country that must run. And I think that we must protect. And I think moving forward, those are the kind of statements that we need to hear, given the history that we've had as a country.
All right, thank you very much. We'll have to wind up right there. Sandra Ochola, who's a lawyer, George Donji, a political strategist, and Mark Odinga, who's a political analyst. Thank you for joining us this morning on the Dawn Debate. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we've got some news updates for you, but also we do have lined up for you the newsroom, where we'll look at mainly election reporting. We'll also be looking at the fact that, well, there's been word that some politicians are flaunting the law when it comes to, literally using public funds for campaigns and